15 years ago, she kissed their twins goodbye and walked out into the rain. Tonight, she was begging outside the five-star hotel he built for those same children. The Hale Grand Hotel stood like a quiet promise kept. 5 stories of glass and stone caught the last light of the evening, its name glowing softly above the entrance. Inside, chandeliers spilled warm gold across marble floors. Outside, near the service doors where the staff came and went, a woman sat on the cold steps. Her coat was thin and stained. Her blonde hair, once carefully styled, now fell in dull strands around a face the years had not been kind to. She held out a paper cup with trembling hands. "Anything helps," she said, voice hoarse from hours of asking. "Please, just a little something." She did not know that the man who owned every polished inch of this hotel was about to step out of a black SUV and see her face for the first time in 15 years. Elliot Hale adjusted his tie as he stepped onto the pavement. The tailored suit fit him like a second skin now, but the man inside still remembered what it felt like to wear the same shirt 3 days in a row. He froze when he saw her. For a long moment the world narrowed to the space between them. The woman who had once kissed their newborn twins and then walked away into the rain was now begging at the door of the empire he had built for those same children. He did not move toward her. He did not speak. He simply stood there, the weight of 15 years pressing against his chest, while Diana, the woman who had chosen a different life, looked up and did not yet recognize the man she had left behind. If stories like this move you, stories of quiet strength and dignity that the world often overlooks, I would be truly grateful if you subscribed. It took me weeks to research and craft this story, and your support helps me keep creating them for you. 15 years earlier, Elliot Hale was 23 years old and already carrying more than most men twice his age. He worked the early shift at a warehouse, stacking boxes until his back screamed, then changed into a security uniform and stood on his feet until 3 in the morning. Between those 2 jobs, he came home to a cramped 1-bedroom apartment where 2 tiny cribs took up most of the living room. Caleb and Leela were only 6 weeks old when their mother left. The night Diana walked out, rain hammered against the windows. She had stood in the doorway with her suitcase, tears on her cheeks but her jaw set. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't live like this anymore." She kissed each sleeping baby once, then closed the door behind her. Elliot had stood there holding both infants against his chest, the rain soaking through his shirt, and made a promise he would spend the next decade and a half keeping. His children would never feel like they were a mistake. In the months that followed, sleep became a rumor. He learned to warm bottles with one hand while rocking a crying baby with the other. He learned which cries meant hunger and which ones meant the baby simply needed to be held. On the nights when both twins screamed at once, he would sit on the floor between their cribs, too exhausted to stand, and sing whatever lullaby came to mind until his voice gave out. The judgment came quietly at first. A neighbor who asked where the mother was and then never spoke to him again. A coworker who made a joke about deadbeat mothers and then looked at Elliot like he was the one who had done something wrong. He stopped explaining. He simply worked. There were nights when he came home so tired he could barely see straight, only to find one of the twins had spit up all over the sheets. He would strip the crib, wash everything by hand in the sink because the building's washing machine was broken again, and still be at the warehouse by 6 the next morning. His hands grew calloused, his eyes developed dark circles that never fully left. But every evening, no matter how late he came home, he sat on the edge of their cribs and told them the same thing. "You are wanted," he would whisper. "You are loved, and I am not going anywhere." He said it until he believed it himself. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in the middle of winter when Leela developed a fever that would not break. She was 3 years old. Caleb, always the quieter twin, sat on the floor beside her crib and refused to move, his small hand wrapped around his sister's ankle as if he could anchor her to this world through sheer will. Elliot had no health insurance. The free clinic had a 3-week wait. The emergency room would cost more than he made in 2 weeks. He sat on the bathroom floor with his daughter in his arms, her small body burning against his chest, and felt something inside him crack. He had done everything right. He had worked every hour God gave him. He had loved these children with every piece of himself. And still, here he was, unable to give his daughter the medicine she needed because the world had decided that a single black father working 2 jobs still wasn't enough. For the first time since Diana left, Elliot cried. He cried silently so he wouldn't scare the children, tears running down his face and onto Leela's damp hair. Caleb climbed into his lap without being asked and wrapped his small arms around his father's neck. "It's okay, Daddy," the little boy whispered. "We're here." That was the moment that nearly broke him. Not the exhaustion, not the money, not even the loneliness. It was the realization that his children were trying to comfort him. They were 3 years old and already learning that the world was heavy and that their father carried most of it. Elliot looked at his son's serious little face and made a second promise that night. He would not just survive for them. He would build something that would make sure they never had to carry this kind of weight. Have you ever watched someone you love suffer and felt completely powerless to help them? What did that moment teach you about what really matters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. 3 weeks later, Elliot was walking home from another double shift when he passed a boarded-up building on the edge of the industrial district. A faded "for sale" sign hung crooked in the window. Something about the place made him stop. It had once been a small motor lodge, 12 rooms, a tiny office, and a parking lot full of weeds. The roof sagged, the paint peeled, but Elliot stood there in the cold and saw something else. He saw a place where tired people could rest. He saw a chance. He did not have the money, not even close, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a different future, one where he was not just surviving, but building. He thought about the way guests at nicer hotels were treated with dignity, how the staff smiled like they meant it. He thought about his children growing up in a world where their father was not always exhausted and broke. That night, after the twins were asleep, Elliot sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and began to write. He wrote down every skill he had learned from working in warehouses and standing security. He wrote down questions he wanted to ask people who actually ran hotels. He wrote down the names of his children and the promise he had made them. The next morning, he called the number on the sign. The owner was an older man who had no patience for dreamers, but recognized something in Elliot's voice. They met. They talked for 3 hours, and for the first time since Diana walked out that rainy night, Elliot felt a door open, not wide, but enough. Buying the motor lodge was the easy part. Keeping it alive nearly killed him. Elliot worked every job himself at first. He cleaned rooms between guest checkouts. He fixed leaky faucets at 2 in the morning. He learned how to smile at the front desk even when his back hurt and his children were home alone with a neighbor. He studied hospitality management at the community college 3 nights a week, bringing his textbooks to the front desk and reading between phone calls. There were months when he almost lost everything. A pipe burst in the middle of winter and flooded 3 rooms. A guest complained to the health department over something that wasn't even his fault. He went 3 weeks without paying himself so he could make payroll for the 2 part-time housekeepers he had finally hired. Through it all, he raised Caleb and Lila. He taught them how to make beds with hospital corners. He let them help fold towels on slow afternoons. When they asked why they couldn't have the things other kids had, he told them the truth. Because right now, we're building something bigger than things. They didn't always understand, but they watched their father get up every single day and choose them again. The transformation was not loud. It happened in the quiet moments. It happened when he finally learned to delegate instead of doing everything himself. It happened when he stopped apologizing for being a single father and started carrying himself like a man who had earned his place. It happened the day he looked in the mirror and realized the exhaustion in his eyes had been replaced by something steadier, something that looked a lot like dignity. By the time Caleb and Lila turned 12, the Motor Lodge had become a respected boutique hotel. By the time they turned 15, Elliot Hale owned the Hale Grand, a 5-star property that people traveled across the country to experience. He had done it without connections, without a wealthy family, without anyone handing him anything. He had done it with the same 2 hands that once held his newborn twins in the rain. Diana had been sitting outside the Hale Grand for 6 hours when Elliot finally stepped out of his SUV. She looked up as the door closed, and for the first time, recognition flickered across her face. The man in the dark suit with the quiet authority was not the broke 23-year-old she had left in a rainy doorway. This man stood taller. His shoulders carried no apology. His eyes, when they met hers, held 15 years of nights she would never understand. "Elliot," she said. Her voice cracked on his name. He did not answer right away. He simply looked at her, at the woman who had kissed their children and then chosen a different life. Security was already moving toward her, but Elliot raised one hand and they stopped. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "I didn't know this was yours. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I just need—" "You need help," Elliot finished for her. His voice was calm, not cold, but not warm either. "You came here looking for help." She nodded, shame and desperation fighting for space on her face. Elliot thought about the nights he had held both twins while they cried for a mother who never came back. He thought about the fevers and the empty cupboards and the way Caleb had once asked if it was his fault Mommy left. He thought about every single time he had chosen love over bitterness because his children deserved a father who did not poison their hearts. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He did not give her everything. He gave her enough for a meal and a night in a decent shelter. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and spoke the words he carried for 15 years. "My children have a father," he said quietly. "They have always had a father. What they needed from you, you couldn't give. I won't let you take from them now just because you're empty." Diana's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Elliot turned to the security guard. "Make sure she gets to the shelter safely, and give her the number for the Family Services office." He looked back at Diana one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be here." He walked into his hotel without looking back. Upstairs, in the penthouse he had booked for them, Caleb and Lila were waiting. They had grown up knowing only their father's love, and tonight Elliot would sit with them and tell them what he had always told them, that they were wanted, that they were loved, and that he was not going anywhere. What would you have done if you were in Elliot's position? Would you have offered more help or drawn the same boundary? And how do you think his children would have felt if he had chosen differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. In the weeks that followed, Elliot did not speak of Diana again, but something shifted in the way he moved through his hotel. He began stopping to talk with the staff more often. He asked the single mother who worked housekeeping about her children. He made sure the night security guard, a young man raising his sister alone, had enough support. The quiet strength that had once been only for his own family began to ripple outward. Caleb and Lila noticed. They were 15 now, old enough to understand pieces of what their father had carried. One evening, Caleb asked the question Elliot had been waiting for. "Did she come here looking for you?" Elliot was honest. "She came here looking for help, and I gave her what I could without giving her what belongs to you." Lila was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm glad you're our dad." That was the real victory. Not the hotel, not the money, not even the moment Diana looked up and saw what he had become. The victory was that his children had grown up knowing they were the center of someone's world, not because he had told them, but because he had shown them every single day. The message was simple, and it had taken Elliot Hale 15 years to live it into truth. Quiet strength is not the absence of pain, it is the decision to keep building anyway. It is the choice to love children who did not ask to be born into hard circumstances and to give them a life that makes the hardness worth it. It is the refusal to let someone else's leaving define the staying. Elliot Hale was not a perfect man, but he was a present one. And in a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, his quiet, steady love had built an empire, not of stone and glass, but of two young people who knew exactly what they were worth. If Elliot's story touched something in you, I want you to know you are not alone in feeling it. There are fathers and mothers carrying invisible weights every single day, choosing their children even when it costs them everything. Their stories rarely make headlines, but they shape generations. Have you ever witnessed a parent's quiet strength that stayed with you? What did it teach you about love, sacrifice, or resilience? And if you were given the chance to build something from nothing for the people you love most, what would you want that something to stand for? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories often become the seeds for future videos. If this story moved you, and if you believe the world needs more reminders that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they love deeply enough, I would be grateful if you subscribed. Hit the bell so you never miss a new story. And as always, thank you for spending this time with me. Until the next one, take care of the people who show up for you, and never underestimate the power of quiet strength.